Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Ron Antevy, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're very excited to have you here as we consider ourselves a technology-oriented bank, and you're certainly one of South Florida's biggest success stories with a technology company. So really excited about digging into your background and hearing your story, and we appreciate you for sharing it with all of our listeners. So I usually like to start back with the family, because I found in talking with entrepreneurs that usually there's a story there that creates this entrepreneurial spirit. So you want to tell me about how you grew up in your family and where you grew up?
Sure. And that is the case for me, for sure. My entire family are immigrants. I'm first generation American. Growing up, my grandfather was a contractor, so he was in construction. My parents were involved in construction. My uncle was a contractor. So that began like my love for construction and how I ended up getting into construction software. But one of the things that I always remember very distinctly was every Saturday we would go to my grandparents' house. And we'd sit around and have lunch, my parents, my uncles, my grandparents, all of us. And they would talk business just for hours. And so I would sit around since I was, 10 years old and listen to everybody talking business and get involved in the conversation. So that, I would say, if I reflect back, is where I got my love for, I wanted to do that. I wanted to be, and they were talking real estate deals and they were talking different kinds of business deals, but it was just for hours, and they criticize each other and tell, oh yeah, that was a bad deal you did, and I got a better deal. I bought this real estate over here. So I just loved the discussion and what they were doing, what they were thinking about. And I think that began my desire to be an entrepreneur and my entrepreneurial journey. Wow. And then the specific, construction was because they were in the construction business. And if you've ever met anybody that's in construction, like one of the cool things that my grandfather would drive down the street and say, see that building? I built that, or I was involved in building that. So it's like you have something to look at that you could say, I did that, which is a very, it's a rewarding kind of experience. So I also got that early on, and I'm like, oh, I want to go build stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. As bankers, we say, I financed that,
right?
When we go, so I can relate to that. So and where did you grow up?
I grew up here in South Florida, in Hollywood.
In Hollywood, okay,
yep.
Great. So then you went to college. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that, because I think that's kind of the beginnings of everything, right?
Yep. So I went to the University of Florida. I got a degree in civil engineering, and the idea was I'm going to go out when I'm done and get into construction in some form or fashion. I ended up getting a job and working for Waste Management, Wayne Huizinga's company, and at the time, and so I did that for a little while. My brother started eBuilder, and then I joined him a couple years after he started. But my brother, he and I had a dream since we were kids. We're one day going to do something together. So he became an architect. He studied architecture, and then he got a master's in construction management, also at the University of Florida. And his master's thesis back in he graduated with his master's in 95. His master's thesis was about this brand new thing called the internet, and how the internet can revolutionize construction and improve communication. And someone on his thesis committee said, you should make that into a business. This is, if you think 95, the internet was just people were just building websites for the first time. So he ended up starting eBuilder in 95 in Gainesville. Basically, it was his master's thesis that became the version 1.0 of the business plan. And then a couple of years after he started, he was still trying to figure out his way. I joined him, went to Gainesville, and we started from there and got into business.
And so what year did eBuilder kind of launch?
So we launched, the company launched in 95. The product launched in like 90, the early stage of the product launch in 96 or so, 97. And then I joined him in 98.
And so you were working during that time, and your brother's launching this company. Did you guys have to go out and raise money to kind of get the product developed?
So the reason so I was kind of advising him on the side as I had my job, I had my career, I'm happy and so on. And he's trying to figure things out. He didn't take a paycheck for when I showed up, he still had never taken a paycheck.
Wow.
So he was trying to figure out what to do. When I decided, okay, I'm going to join, we're going to partner up here. The first thing I said we need to do is raise money. And so I went out and started looking to raise capital. And we did raise capital we closed a round in 2000. We had some strategic money from McGraw-Hill at the time. McGraw-Hill used to have a business that sold construction data called Dodge Data. And so they wanted to make an investment. It was a strategic investment, and we took some capital. And
did you have contacts there, or how did you guys approach them?
No, we did have some contacts through they had some magazines, and we had a contact through the magazine. We sort of did the rounds. We went and talked to a bunch of VCs and other folks in New York and in Silicon Valley. And at that time, it was hard to be a Florida company in Gainesville, technology company in Gainesville.
People it wasn't exactly Silicon Valley, right?
Right. They were like, well, where is this? How do I even get there, let alone finance you? Right. It was tough to get traditional kind of VC financing. But we did have some contacts, and they liked what we were doing. Everybody was talking to McGraw-Hill at the time. They liked what we were up to, and they decided to make a small investment.
Wow. And so that was the beginning of the funding. And then did you have to continue to go out there and raise capital? So,
we were very, these days you hear about I would say the traditional way. You get funding, it gives you 12 to 18 months of runway, and then you get another round and so on and so on. We really bootstrapped. So the first 5 years we bootstrapped it. What we did is we built websites, and we took the money from the building of websites. So back then, construction companies, we would talk to them about software. They had no idea what we were talking about, but they said, but we hear that everyone has a website now. We need a website. So can you help us? So we said, yeah. So we built websites. We take the money from that and use it to build our product, and then just slowly but surely get off the ground. We took the money from McGraw-Hill, which gave us a little bit of breathing room, because being bootstrapped as a tech company is very, very, very difficult.
Right.
So it gave us a little bit of breathing room. But from that moment on, we never took any additional funds.
Oh, wow.
So we were cash flow positive and profitable very quickly after that, and built the business profitably from there.
That's great.
Yeah.
So with the, what was your degree in? From Florida.
So my degree was in civil engineering.
And your brother was in architecture.
Yep.
So neither one of you had a computer science background. So
that's right.
Talk about that. How did you build technology without that background?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's very hard, right? So now we know enough to be dangerous, certainly after 20 some odd years. But we had a partner in the beginning of the business. Who was the technologist. He had a computer science degree. And then we had our first employee who was with us for 20 plus years. He just recently retired. He was a computer science major as well. So It was really on them to figure it out from the tech perspective. Now, what we did is when you do a technology type of business, somebody needs to have the domain experience. And where we came from was the domain experience, understanding what a contractor or a developer or a facility owner is, where we ended up focusing, what a facility owner needs in software to do their job. So we could lay that out. And then the technical know-how of how we're going to build it was done by these other folks.
Yeah, that's a great story, because I think of, I can relate to that in banking, right? Because we had the same situation, kind of, like I don't understand the technology part, but we found the person who does,
Right.
and Corey was that person for us, so.
But you obviously, and you understand the banking industry and how it works and what you need and what people need. And that's just as important. You need
Exactly.
you need them both.
You need them both. That's true. Yeah. So I think, and that's where you get a successful technology company, right? Where
That's
you
right.
marrying those two. So, so I guess for you and your brother launched this thing, and you're working. You've got a nice job. You're at Waste Management, great company. You're working for Wayne Heising, a company. Nothing could be better in Fort Lauderdale than working for one of his companies. So that must have been a big leap of faith for you to jump in. So tell me about how'd you overcome that fear? Because a lot of people, entrepreneurs, they're working at a job right now, and they might have an opportunity like that. And maybe you could offer some advice about that.
Yeah, no, and it was a huge leap of faith. And I think that the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur is to get the gumption, to go and do that, and to be bold and to go try something like that, because especially you have a job, you have a good salary and all these other things. So for me, what got me to do it, I think, was being naive. I was young. And the older I get, if I reflect now, and I think this is a challenge for entrepreneurs, that as more years go on, you have a family, you have responsibilities, you have bills, you have a mortgage, you have these other things. It makes it harder and harder to take that leap of faith. But when you're starting out, I would joke around with my brother. It's like, you have nothing to lose, so go for it, because what you have nothing, so you have nothing to lose, right? Yeah. So it's easy early on, and that's what got me to do it. It still was scary. It was very scary. I went from a great job, great salary, great career path. I was one of the youngest, manager at the level that I was in the entire company. So I was kind of a rising star, and had a great career there. And I left all of that and didn't draw a salary for a year and started living off of my savings. So it was scary.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. And so I mentioned the theme about growing up in an entrepreneurial family. I've heard that from a lot of people, and I've also heard the same thing about starting young. And I tell the story, I didn't start anything until I was 50, until I had family. And so, for me, that was a hard risk to take. And so,
that's
I
huge.
think those who are out there who are still, in their 20s, I would say that's the time to really go for it.
Yep. And you think that, you need experience and you need all these things, and you'll wait and wait and wait. But really what you need is just, the gumption, just to say, I'm just going to do it. The hell with it. And you can do it easier when you're younger. So
well, that's great. So you guys you raise some money, you get the company going, you develop, a product, right? And then you're out. And so how did you handle the sales, and how did you grow the business from there?
Yeah. So we started in 95. John and I are working together in 98. We're working. My personal focus initially was, besides the financing and getting some money, was really on the product and making sure we get the product right. Because in my mind, and this is a classic mistake that I think entrepreneurs make, I figured if I have a great product, then it's going to sell itself, right? And we're gonna be successful.
That's what Steve Jobs did,
right? So
but it doesn't work for everybody.
No. So we did that for a while, and we ended up plateauing with very little revenue. I mean, we had maybe a couple million in revenue at the time, in the early 2000s, and we had no growth. We were essentially flat. And so we said, what is going on? And I was trying to figure this out. I had a few mentors and people that I talked to, and and someone said to me, products don't sell, sales sell, right? It's sales and marketing is what sells things. I mean, yes, you have to have a product, that's table stakes. So both my brother and I became students of sales and marketing and the whole process of sales and marketing. And that was about 2003, 2004. It also was a time, there was the dot-com boom, followed by the dot-com bust or the dot bomb. So it was very difficult to be a dot-com company in the early 2000s. So we started learning all the details, everything you need to know about sales. We figured a bunch of stuff out, went to training and so on. But once we put a process in place for sales and marketing, that is when the company started to grow. That's when we had over a decade where we grew at about 30% a year, consistently. So at least 30%. So it was 50% in some years as well. So, and the way we did it is we had, is very the old-fashioned way. You know, we figured out who our ideal customer profile was and who we were targeting. And then we had folks on the phones, getting meetings with those kind of companies and with the people in the companies that we needed to talk to. And then we would show them our software and explain to them the benefit and take them through a sales process. And slowly but surely, we landed one and another and another. We started out, an interesting thing, which is counterintuitive, and I tell a lot of people about this now, is we started out saying we have construction software, and construction software has applicability with contractors and owners and architects and engineers and anybody doing any construction. What we did is we narrowed our focus significantly, and we said, we're only going to sell hospitals. We're going to sell the owners of hospitals, a certain kind of hospital. They had to have more than one campus, like a Memorial Healthcare here in South Florida. They had to be doing a certain dollar amount of construction every year. They had to have a certain number of beds. So we had all these criteria, and it worked out that there were about 700 entities in the entire United States that fit this criteria. And we said to the whole company, we're only going to sell these 700. That's our market going forward. We're going to ignore everybody else. And that was a very counterintuitive thing. It's the one time I argued with my brother that we joke around. It's like one of the only times we didn't agree on something, because he focused on sales in the business. It was his focus throughout the business. And he said, we're gonna go broke. How are we gonna make a living if all we have is 700 targets to go after? And but we did that. And what ended up happening is we sold one hospital, and then another hospital, and then another hospital. And before you know it, we became the leader in the United States. We are the leader today. 1 out of every 6 hospitals in the United States uses our software for their construction. So it got easier. And then from there, we picked another market.
Whose idea was that, to focus on the hospitals?
To pick the hospitals was something we looked at our customer base. We had about 100 customers at the time, and we had a few hospitals. And so we said, we liked the characteristics. Well,
your brother didn't like that idea.
Yeah, but the idea of focus was me pushing it. Now, it wasn't my idea. I read about it somewhere.
Well, I'm saying, so in the business, though, you're the one who said, hey, we need to focus on one
I
more.
pushed it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I got a lot of pushback. Because again, if you're at sales,
yeah,
and someone, if you were to go today to people in your business that are in sales and say to them, instead of focusing on all of South Florida, you're only allowed to focus on these 30 companies. It's all if you bring me company 31 to do a bank loan, you're not going to get any commission on that. You're only allowed to sell these 30 companies.
You taking notes on this, Ryan?
You'll have mutiny.
We're learning a lot here today.
But what happens is when you get focused like that, you suddenly get really good at it. And and your competitors aren't doing that. They're chasing, one day they're doing this and one day they're doing that. So you get better.
That's a very, Ron, I think that's one of the best ideas that I've heard on the podcast, that's really practical for anybody. Because any entrepreneur, they've got to sell, right?
Yep.
And I think for the most part, when you're starting a business and you're just out there, hey, you have a pulse and are you breathing?
That's right.
Sign here. You're good. But when you really focus on that specific market, then you're getting referrals.
Yep.
And you are known. You've got an expertise in this area.
And you're learning how to talk about it. You're learning. You can build the whole company around servicing that exact type of customer. Now, your point though, you do have to. You can't do it right out of the gate. You can't when you start. And when we started, if you had a pulse and a checkbook, we were there for you. We could help you, you know. But there comes a point where that is no longer going to get you to the next level.
Yeah, I was going to say pulse not necessary, but checkbook is. Right. Well, he's got a checkbook. So you're building this company, and so when did you say to yourself, hey, you know, this is really working out? I mean, kind of what year was that when you started to realize you guys are onto something?
Yeah, so the first decade, we call it the lost decade. So the first 10 years, we're trying to figure out the product. We just had gotten our hands on sales and figuring that out. So now we're in about like 2004, 2005. And really from that moment on, we worked hard, but we had a lot of success. Every year, companies growing, more customers, and really big, huge healthcare systems and governments. We expanded our markets. So amazing clients and things like that. And that kind of continued for at least, a decade. And so now we're into the mid 2015, 16, 17, and we were doing well. I had been figuring out how to go from me and my brother and a few people to having 20 people and 50 people, and then all of a sudden 200 people and VPs and a leadership team and directors, and building out a different structure at a different scale. So we were keeping busy, and it was fun and exciting. But there came a time, and this maybe bleeds into when we ended up selling the business. There came a time where I started personally to feel nervous and said to myself, and this is a mental thing, it wasn't real, but I started saying to myself, we've had 20 years where we've had all this great success, and my wealth and my family's wealth, my brother's wealth, everything we've done, it's all tied up in this one asset. And we need to diversify. We need to get some help in here. It's like if we make one mistake, we're gonna ruin everything. So that became it became a mental thing for me that I said, I need to get somebody to help me. I need some other money in here. And then I started thinking about a partner, and eventually we sold the business. That wasn't the plan. We actually were gonna just get a partner.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about 2008-9. How did that affect your business? Because that was a huge downturn. It had to affect construction.
Yeah. So very interestingly, it had the reverse effect. We had our best years in 8, 9, and 10. And because what we were selling was, in very simple terms, besides the software, but what we were selling is a way to build the things you need to build as a facility owner. If you're a hospital or a school district or a government entity, there's a certain amount of construction you have to do, right? A hospital is population based. It's not economy based, what you're doing in a hospital.
True.
So there's a certain amount of construction you have to do every year, and we were going to give you a way to do that same amount of construction for less money.
Okay.
And at a time when all of these facility owners had less money, the recession and the downturn, we were looked at as a great tool to help them. And a lot of them, even government entities, I remember, unheard of, but government entities were doing layoffs in their construction departments. And the government typically doesn't like to do that.
Right.
And so they had less people to get, and they still had work that had to get done. So we, again, had a tool and a way for them to continue to do their work with less people, less money. And so we were selling more than ever. I mean, I still am surprised by that. And people would see me around those times and say, they'd apologize. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're suffering. I'm like, no, we're actually doing pretty well.
Well, thank God you didn't pick the condo development market as your target, market, or things would have been
You're right.
different, right?
We had a couple of clients that were your traditional real estate developer, and those customers were gone in a heartbeat. Yes. Right. Yep.
So you mentioned mentors when you were, trying to think about how to scale the business and everything. So are there any particular mentors that really stand out?
So I'm part of Vistage, which is kind of like a YPO, but it's a CEO roundtable group. And I've been in Vistage, the same group, since 2002, so 21 years.
So I've been in Vistage also.
You are?
Since 2009. So
okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so you get it totally.
I definitely get it.
So there's people in my group that have just been, tremendous and instrumental in helping me. There's a couple of guys, different kinds of businesses. One of them is in TV production business. One of them is in IT, but distribution type of stuff. They taught me so many. They're the ones that helped me with sales and marketing. Because me being an engineer and thinking, I used to say in the beginning, I'm not sales. That's not my thing. I'm an engineer. I'm an operator. And now it's kind of funny because now they all look at me. I'm like the sales guru, but they helped me. So mentors in Vistage were key for me.
That's great. And how did you happen to end up in Vistage? How did you reach out to that group?
I had a friend tell me about it. A friend that I went to college with, and he said, there's someone starting up a new Vistage group, and this Vistage, and explained what it is. I went to a meeting, learned about it. I said, oh, this sounds pretty good. And as you can probably relate, that old cliche of like, it's lonely when you're an entrepreneur, there's no one to ask. There's nobody to talk to. I had my family that I would talk to about stuff, but my family knew real estate and construction, and tech it's a very foreign concept to people that are used to dealing with physical things.
Right.
So I didn't get as much help from them. And so I heard about it. I checked it out. I met a few people there right away where I was like, this would be great if I could just be in the same room. Maybe I'll pick something up from these more successful people than me. I had the imposter syndrome at the time. I'm like, there's no way I can even, they're not even going to let me in here, But that's how I found it and got started there.
That's great. It's a great story. So tell us about, so you mentioned the sale, right? So but you really didn't intend to sell. So you were looking for just more capital?
Yeah, so what we decided, we have this, at this point, we have a business that's doing over $50 million in recurring revenue, which for a software business, technology business, is pretty significant. And it was very profitable. So business is doing great. We're growing and so on. But I had this desire to de-risk a little bit. I said, I don't want to have everything for my brother and I tied up in one place. So I decided that we're going to go out and run a process. And I wasn't decided on this part. I said, maybe we'll sell 20% of the business, or maybe we'll sell 50% of the business, and then we'll continue to run it. When we actually did the deal, I just turned 50 and my brother was 46. So we weren't ready to retire or anything like that. We had a lot of energy left. So we figured, okay, we're going to go maybe sell part of the business and then keep going. And what would be nice is, one, we would take a little bit of cash and set it aside. If anything were to happen to the business, we're good. Yeah. And we'd end up with a financial partner who's been there and done that and built $1 billion company and has been invested in other businesses, and we'll get some help.
Sure.
So that was the thought process.
And this is 2015, you said, Ron?
This was 17 that we actually started a process in 17. Thinking about it, and I had been talking to people before then, and but we ran a formal process. So what we did is around mid-17, with that in mind, we started a process, and I had talked to many private equity firms, and I got to know a few of them. So I already felt comfortable that there were a handful of firms that I would be very comfortable selling a part of my business to them, having them be my partner going forward. So that's how that process started. And then what ended up happening, and I could tell you, I could talk about the process and stuff if you wanted, but what ended up happening is, along the way, Trimble came and they looked at the business and they said, we really like what you're doing. And they had a strategy, big picture strategy, and we were a fit in that strategy. But we don't buy parts of businesses. We're a public company and we acquire businesses. So is that something you would consider? And there was one specific meeting that in the beginning where it was the second time I had a conversation with Trimble, where the CEO says, it's a $4 billion company. CEO shows up here with his sort of right-hand person. And we had a 3-hour conversation. No real agenda, just getting to know each other. And I think my brother and I walked out of the room after that 3-hour meeting and we said, we could sell our business to this guy. We really liked the two of them. Like we felt a connection right away, that we felt trust. We felt like our business would be in good hands, all the cliche, it's your baby and all that. And it's true. We felt like we definitely could do something with these folks.
Wow.
And then we started to entertain it. We went through a process with them. So then we had to change gears. I had to go back to our investment bankers and tell them, okay, let's look at this option. This is the only option to sell that we're going to look at is with these guys. We had a few other people that talked to us about that. And then we started to explore that and ended up doing something with them.
Great. How many employees did you have at the time?
We had about 250 or so.
And I heard that there was some sharing of that wealth with the employees.
Yeah,
so tell us about that.
That was one of the best days of our life. I mean, if my brother was here, he would tell you the same thing. We had issued stock options to everyone in the company. So everybody had some piece they were going to get. And what nobody realized was the price was going to be where it was, and people
it was $500 million?
$500 million. And, so the people's shares were worth, $50 or $60 a share. And most people's options were at like 50 cents or $1.
Wow.
So even if you had a few thousand shares, it was a good, hit. So, but that day, we sat everyone down. That we had to keep it secret, public company, so the whole process, there were 4 or 5 people involved as we went through the process. But it was a Friday. It was announced 9:00. It went over the wire. And at that, we brought the whole company together. We told them what was happening. And I explained to everybody what was going to happen with their shares. And then we had a few employees, like maybe 5, that were so new. We had one, in fact, that had been there he started Monday. This was Friday. So we announced to them that they're also going to get at least $5,000 just for being here, because everybody is going to share. Yeah. and then what we did is, that was a lot of excitement in that moment. But then we took about 3 hours. We had identified ahead of time. John and I went and we made a list of about 20 or 30 employees that had really been with us or made an outsized contribution in our minds. And so we brought them in, sat them down one at a time. We said, okay, do you understand what happened today? Yes. Do you realize how much money you're getting? And they were ecstatic. So one person is sitting there and he was crying, and he's like, wow. I can't believe it. I'm gonna get $350,000, and I'm gonna be able to send my kids to the college they want to go to, thanks to this deal. And we said, that's great. The reason we wanted to bring you in here is we wanted to tell you we're doubling it. Wow! So we did that for about 30 people, and that was the greatest feeling ever. That's awesome. And so it's. Some people, a few people walked away millionaires, and
that's really great.
Few people went out and started businesses and did things, and people definitely did a lot of stuff. Like I still get stories I get people that will email me or text me and show me their vacation home that they bought or their RV or something, and they're like, I bought this when we sold the business, and here we are on vacation, like 5 years later. So it's just nice to have been able to do that.
That's really, I get goosebumps listening to that story. That is so nice, and it's so fulfilling, right?
It really is.
To have brought all these people along on that journey, and then they all are rewarded for their hard work, and that's the American dream, really, right?
Yeah, and then some of them also, besides so there's that like one hit, if you will.
Yeah.
And some got more than others, certainly. But the other thing is, it's really cool to see we sold to this big company, and now there are people who used to work for me who are in very high positions in this big company, and
right.
they probably wouldn't have those opportunities had we not done this. So like, to me, that's like, it's an ongoing fulfillment to see that. It's pretty awesome.
Great story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're involved in junior achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And so tell us about that, how you got involved in JA and why.
Lori Salarulo, I met several years ago and learned about junior achievement. My kids went there as part of their in their high school and middle school programs and stuff. So I knew about it. But what I've over the last 5-10 years, as I've been able to divide up more time, I was so focused on my business for many years, mm-hmm. and now I have the opportunity where I can do other things. Areas where I want to give back is I want to be able to give opportunity, if I can, to the next generation, the young people, young entrepreneurs. I'm involved in other things as well when it comes to entrepreneurship, mm-hmm. Business, financial literacy for the sort of like the younger generation. To me, that is a way to give back, because that's, there are people that helped me, and I would love the opportunity to be able to give back in that way. And JA fits that for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So any other advice that you would like to give entrepreneurs out there listening?
The main thing I would say is don't give up. The whole concept of grit and persistence, very important. And then be curious and keep your ears open. Don't get too focused on being right. That's I think an important lesson that we learned over time. Keep your ears open, be curious, learn, and you're going to be successful, and stick to it.
That's great.
Well,
thank you. We're going to go now to the lightning round.
All right.
Where we're going to hit you with a few quick questions where you just, shoot back what your answers are. So, favorite book?
Favorite book, a business book, I would say is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by
that.
Pat Lencioni.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Learned a lot about culture and things, in the business from
Absolutely. What's a song from your youth when you're growing up that's kind of like a theme song that you might have in the back of your mind, something you might even be ashamed to admit?
So, in the 80s, I was a DJ. Like in college, that was my first little entrepreneurial business, actually. So I was always into music. But any kind of dance stuff from the 80s, like 80s freestyle music, Stevie B, or any of that kind of stuff is interesting to me.
Good.
And gets me going.
All right. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
Related to what I said a minute ago, someone said to me, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. And that has always stuck with me. So basically being curious, listening, don't talk too much.
That's a good one. So your business was born in the early days of the internet. Mm-hmm. Now we have AI. And just, not a long answer, just, mm-hmm. Are you afraid of it, or are you optimistic about it?
I'm optimistic about it. I'm not afraid of it. I think that certainly bad things can happen with it. There's maybe some fears that are warranted, but that's the case for every technology that has come out, starting with fire, I think. Something bad could happen, but it's going to overall benefit us, I think.
Good answer. What are you most grateful for today?
My family, I'd say family, my wife, kids, extended family, brothers, my family, and getting to have those relationships and is important, and I'm grateful for it.
That's great. What travel destination is at the top of your list right now?
I haven't made any plans, but I'd love to go to like the New Zealand area, Australia, that part of the world. I've never been there and heard a lot about it.
Great. What is a fear that you've overcome?
I think as it relates to business too, I have overcome the fear of giving difficult feedback to people. I've always, I think early on, it was hard for me to tell people things that they needed to hear because I didn't want to hurt their feelings, and this extends into my personal life as well. And I've just gotten better at it, and I'm not afraid of it anymore, and I know it's helpful. So
that's a good one too. What about in terms of a favorite movie or show?
I would say some of the older movies. Like I'm going back to date myself here, but the '80s, I liked a lot of the movies, like the Bill Murray movies of like Stripes or Caddyshack.
Those are classics.
I love those movies.
No, you got to check those out on Netflix. You can still get them. What do you do to keep in shape? You're in good shape, and you have hobbies that you. So I run. That's like my thing. Okay.
So I walk, run, but I'll get out and do 8 miles on the weekend or something. And it's also a great way to keep my mind, clear my mind and stuff.
Sure.
But that's the main thing I do.
What about the best moment, which I think I know what the best moment was, but also the worst moment in business, best and worst?
The best moment, I definitely would say, is that day, being able to share with everybody when we sold the business and seeing everyone's reaction was a moment I'll never forget. Yeah. I have other great moments of, the big sales and stuff like that. The worst moment, in 2001, we had, it was the dot bomb. So it was at that point, if you had E in your name or .com, anything, people would hang up on you, didn't want to know because they thought the internet is now dead. And around that time, a friend of mine, someone I look up to, sat me down and said, listen, I appreciate your diligence and your determination, but you should start polishing up your resume. And you might need to go back and get a job because looks like it's not going to work out. Wow. And that was hard to hear. Yeah. I didn't listen.
Good. That's good for you.
Kept going, but
well, that goes back to your determination and grit, right?
Yep.
So I guess kind of last question: if there were one person, living or dead, that you could have dinner with, who would that be?
Well, there's a person that I met he spoke at our Vistage group about 15 years ago. He's now passed away. But his name is Peter Schutz. I don't know if you saw him as well, but he was the CEO of Porsche in the 80s, and he's credited with turning that company almost went bankrupt in the 80s. And he turned it around. Wow. And they also were going to, at that time, discontinue the 911. And my God. He stopped that. He stopped that from happening. Wow. So he's a fascinating person. And what he came and spoke to us about is a bunch of ideas that he's an engineer also by training, but a bunch of ideas on building a business and being successful in business. And he talked about how most of what he told us is he didn't invent it. You can read about it in books. He's just giving you his perspective on how he's applied many of the ideas. And a lot of what he talked about in a 3-hour session, it's probably closer to 20 years ago that he did this, I have used I credit a lot of my success to a 3-hour conversation with him. Wow. And I'd love to be able to spend more time with him if I could.
Is there any, is there a YouTube, is there anything out there where you can access information?
He wrote a book. called extraordinary, getting extraordinary results from ordinary people, something like that. But I found that there may be something online where you hear him talking, because the talks were better. Like, he had the most amazing stories. He talked about, just as an example, he talked about in a company how if you give people purpose, and they have a real purpose besides just whatever their job is, and that gives people the motivation, and that's how people end up. That's how you get a company that's super successful, and you get everyone motivated about a goal. And the example he gave was going to Le Mans, the race, the 24-hour race or whatever, and they had not been winning. Porsche was not winning because the prior management was cutting their budget and was focusing on numbers and financials and stuff. And he did a simple thing. He sat everyone down and he said, we will never go to another race unless we are going to win. Because they were going to the races saying, we're not going to win. We're just coming here. We're going to do our thing, but there's no way we could win. So he says, if you have that attitude, we're not going to the race again. So we are never going to another race unless we feel we can win going there. And I'm going to give you 24 hours. I want you to go put your heads together and figure out. And the race was 4 weeks away, this next race. I'm going to give you 24 hours. I want you to put your heads together and you come back to me and tell me what you need, what you're going to do in order for us to win this race. And they put their heads together. They came back and they said, 4 weeks, it's impossible, but we're going to take this chassis from this car here, and we have an old thing that and if you give us a few dollars, we can do this and that. And what they had that they never had before was now the belief that they can win, and the support of the CEO who said, we're not going unless we can win. And they won. And it's a great story that is very well known with the racing and all that stuff. So things like that, of just how you give people purpose and passion. And he had many stories like this, that just concepts that you can apply to any business.
Wow.
So I loved it.
That's great. I mean, thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to check that out too. Let me just ask you, how can people get in touch with you? Are you on LinkedIn? And
I'm on LinkedIn, certainly, and I am in the process of setting up a sort of a website for my family office. But you can reach me also via email, ron@antevycapital.com.
Okay, great. Well, this has been a really great podcast. A lot of great advice. I think this is one of the best, Ryan. They all seem good when we do them, but really great advice. Thank you for being here today, Ryan.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been great. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.